the CAPE exam the ultimate determinant of value added? And if so, should that be so? Should that be the ultimate determinant of value added, or should there be some other measure? All those things we'll discuss after these, where I invite Professor Patterson to the discussion.
Hi everyone, my name is Kurt Dunn.
Greetings from Kali's Kelly Yoga.
Hey, it's Robin Morrison, and I am your National Physical Activity Specialist. And it's time to make a move.
Jamaica, let's get moving again. Season 2 of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Jamaica Move series is here. Join us Wednesdays at 5 a.m. and Saturdays at 8 a.m. right here on CVM TV. Let's get moving.
Make a move now.
Welcome to the ZZ Lottery Draw for 8:20 p.m. Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. The one-drop winning number is 8. The hat-trick winning numbers are 4, 0, 5. The four-play winning numbers are 6, 8, 3, 8. The Lucky Day Lotto winning numbers are 96, 20, 12, 1. The fireball is white. Thank you for playing with Izizi.
First up, 2023 Ben Francis Cup winners McGraw battle Charlie Mount at 1:30 p.m. Then Dintle Technical and Uaten High square off at 3:30 p.m. The Costa Cup doubleheader, October 5. See it happen on CVM TV.
Schoolboy Football, brought to you by Edgechem, AIM Financial Services, Texaco, and Connix.
Back with us here on CVM TV as we discuss the issue of education. I have three erudite guests with me with perspectives that they are sharing on what they think can be done to boost value added, assessing, of course, whether they think value added is adequate, whether the environment is enabling enough, and of course, how can we, what measures that we can put in place to solve that problem to ensure that schools have a fighting chance, a school picked at random as a fighting chance of building the average student that they get through their gates, whether at the primary or secondary level. In terms of the value-added scores for non-traditional and traditional schools, we have those for you. So we're looking at a graphic with non-traditional schools. Jonathan Grant High, Homewood Technical, Cedar Grove in Portmore, Old Harbour High, which has done very, very well in recent times, St. Mary's College, Edwin Allen. And in terms of where they rank for value-added scores, I mean, which is why I took so much time to go to the definition and the explanation, so you could see what the table is telling you about Dintil's ability to add value to their students and the top 8 non-traditional schools where value added is concerned. What about the traditional schools, the usual suspects, I want to call them, the schools that people always trump for, no pun intended, when talking about the best schools in Jamaica? One of the schools I believe that is grossly underrated by people who don't pay attention. Glenmuir has been outstanding for decades, and look at where they rank, where the traditional, where the usual suspects are concerned. Wolmer's Girls, St. Jago, St. Andrew High, Immaculate, Campion College among the traditional schools and how they perform. I'm turning now to Professor Orlando Patterson. He chairs the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission. In my position that I sit day by day as a journalist, I have various discussions with various teaching leaders and teachers themselves. And I don't know, I get a strange vibe from them about the report produced by Professor Patterson and his team. Either A, they haven't read it, which I'm surprised and disappointed by. 2, they don't understand. And those who've read seem to not agree with so much of it because it can be interpreted, well, it is interpreted by them as somehow a criticism of what they have been doing over time. And you know how Jamaican teachers are where criticism and critique are concerned. They don't want to hear any of it. Yeah, they just want to be lavished with praise all the time, and that serves nobody well. Professor Patterson, where the value-added aspect of our educational offering is concerned. I ask you the same question I posed to the other two guests. Are we doing well enough? Are we doing enough to ensure that the average school drawn at random can add that value added to a child's experience?
Let me reinforce what Reverend Thwaites just said. The answer is simple no. We have in Jamaica what the World Bank calls a crisis of literacy. It's not a crisis of places. We solved that problem. When I was going to primary school decades ago, we had a crisis in terms of the number of kids going to school. We've solved that problem, but we've not solved the problem of educating them. And this is major. This is not just an educational and social problem. It relates to our biggest crisis, that of criminality, because an illiterate child or a person graduating from school illiterate, the only thing he can do is, go and rob somebody, pick up a gun, and as a means of survival. Let me sort of reinforce something which Dr. Dwyer said, that any school can provide value to kids. When I went to, so I came through the traditional system. When I went to Maypen Elementary School over 7 decades ago, the resources were minimal. It was one long shed with a corrugated iron roof. When the rain fell, you had to stop teaching. But we learned. And what our report showed is that there's tremendous variation, which indicates that schools have the capacity to really add value or educate kids, at least to the level of literacy, if they try hard enough. But it's not just the schools that are involved here. And I think the teachers should bear this in mind. And I think when we think of teaching, we should always think of it within the context of the resources that they get, as well as the kind of social background which they're dealing with. So I regret, and I'm very sorry to hear that the teachers, as you said, are taking this attitude. I think it's important, however, that we get away from the traditional way of evaluating schools, because we miss a lot of the good things that are happening. So when we look at, say, the non-traditional schools, it's just heartening to see the kind of work which Dint Hill, Tech, and Denby High,
Yes.
Edwin Allen schools are doing. These schools are getting kids who are coming from really impoverished homes.
Yes.
But they work with them and they add value at the end. The final results may not compare with what you get in Campion, but that's a false comparison because, value in, value out. So it's important to recognize that it can be done. And one of the value of this exercise is that perhaps schools can learn from each other. They can begin to say, what is it that Dent Hill is doing, which we can learn from? What is it that Glenmore, which we rank #1 among traditional schools, what is it that Glenmore is doing, which we can learn from? So this shouldn't be seen as a criticism by any means. We are all in with one goal here, which is to improve the standards, and the standards are abysmal.
Yes, agreed on that. Abysmal standards. And as I go to the break, Professor Ronnie Thwaites, Dr. Dwyer, the fact is I refuse to accept living in a country where people's children are completing 5 years of primary education and leaving incapable of reading and writing. That is a shame. My children certainly will not complete primary school education and finish incapable of reading and writing. So why should anybody else's children? And it is a personal responsibility that parents have to take, educators have to take, and stakeholders have to take. And we need to stop thinking of ourselves as too precious for criticism and critique. All of us have a role to play in hauling the education sector up, because all of us in some ways have contributed to us scraping the bottom of the barrel, remaining in the doldrums for so long, and not doing right by the next generation of leaders and workers that we say we are training. More on Lead's story after these. I want to look at the common complaint, the resource constraint, and how that affects value being added.
Come rise with sunrise. It's Why Not Wednesday, so you know anything goes. We'll flash back to 1978 with the Pembroke Hall Class of 1978. Think they're up for a TikTok challenge? What does a stinky mango and the Negril 7 Mile Beach have in common? Sheldon Shepherd! You don't want to miss this! Plus, it's dating season with Shensia, and she's giving full-on birthday vibes. You've never seen a sunrise quite like this.
Save so you can live your best life with your Jane Bank savings. You absolutely can. The time by Jane Bank is 8:30.
Welcome back to CVM TV. We're talking education, and we're looking at the value-added aspect of the education offerings and whether or not we are doing enough to get better results, or whether or not indeed we're getting what we pay for. I have Maureen Dwyer with me, I have Ronnie Thwaites with me, and I have Professor Orlando Patterson. Lady Maureen, the question squarely is this. Some teachers will tell you that it is unreasonable to expect a homogeneity of outcomes, sameness of outcomes, consistency of outcomes, when you don't have the homogeneity of inputs, because the resource disparity between and among schools is, the swings are wild. And so, for many schools, because they don't have enough to run the school plant effectively and to invest in what the teachers are able to bring into the classrooms, we have to accept value added being as low as it is in many areas. Do you agree or disagree, and why?
Okay, so let me step back just a little bit to the earlier conversation about value added. Value adding is yes, it is reflected in those pass rates in the examinations, but we also have to be careful we're not skipping over the fact that schools help in the social and personal development of the students. And so sometimes you may not see a reflection in say, CSEC, CAPE, and so on, but the kinds of socialization and the way the teachers have brought the children to a space where they can participate in certain things and express their talents and abilities, we should not ignore that when we talk about value adding.
Yes.
But that said, I wouldn't say that teachers would be outrightly opposed to doing their best, given the resource constraints. In fact, to the contrary, we've found many of the schools to be very caring, and they go over and beyond. And that is through my work, we've established that. However, what we have to look at is the quality that our teachers bring to that classroom space in terms of knowing the curriculum, knowing what children nowadays will need to learn to be able to navigate this complex world. And the supporting resources now coming from the MOE and the stakeholding groups to help them to bring on those other things that the students will need to help them to get to where their counterparts who come from the better off homes and so on are getting. So it is a complex issue, and it goes back to policy in terms of how we spend, where we spend, the kinds of development programs for our teachers, what the curriculum looks like, what are the emphases in the curriculum, because we have more than one in the system, and so on. So it really takes a kind of synchronization of all of those factors, and they need to be brought to bear on policy and then into practice in our classrooms to see if we can do better. But that being said,
yes,
I couldn't sit here and not say that we haven't seen improvements in the system. In some instances, we're not seeing exam results to match improvements. But if you go on the ground, the level of progress being made by some of our students is remarkable.
Yes.
I can give one quick example. We have been trialing the value-adding model, and we're looking at student data at a more granular level. And when we went to a school like Denham Town, for example, it took almost 2 years, based on our research, for the children to really be at a place where they could access the curriculum in its current form, the secondary level curriculum. And so you find that teachers at grade 7 and 8 in those schools, they're actually making up for the deficits at primary before they can begin to actually do the work for the secondary level.
Yeah.
Once they took off, we found them to be doing really well.
Yes.
Can I come in here?
Yes, Professor.
Sure. Look, we have to look at the system as a whole. The value-added exercise, but you should emphasize on the secondary school level, okay? And the problems are certainly there too, in terms of the proportion of kids who are sort of graduating without the requisite CSEC and so on. But actually it points to a greater problem, and that's what's happening before the secondary schools.
Yes.
As you noted in your opening remarks, with a high proportion of kids who can't read, who are going into high school. I mean, we're sort of giving the teachers in the high school, a sort of very poor set of resources.
Yes.
Now, the problem then, the fundamental problem then, which this points to, is what's going on in the primary school.
Yes.
And when we talk about resources, we shouldn't just look at the secondary school separate from the primary school, separate from the tertiary level. We've got to start thinking about whether we have to reallocate our resources to address what is the fundamental problem, which is the failure, the massive failure at the primary level.
Yes.
And I don't see any other way to describe it. If half the kids can't read when they're graduating from primary school, that's a massive, abysmal failure. And that just follows through in the high school. So in thinking about resources, we have to start prioritizing, because quite frankly, as we noted in the report, the government of Jamaica is spending a substantial amount of money on the schools. Indeed, in comparative terms, we rank among the top 10% of countries in terms of the proportion of GDP, and even more so of the budget which goes to education.
Yes.
So basically, we have to think about how we're going to reallocate our resources to take account of the real heart of the crisis, which is the fact that the primary school kids are graduating with half of them.
Yes, and that's where I intended to go with Ronnie Thwaites as a former education minister, because I spoke about that in the earlier segment of the program today, to say that a rebalancing obviously is needed when you speak to the stakeholders, Reverend Thwaites, because they say, well, fine, if Holy Trinity is getting students at grade 7, where only about 5 of them are reading at grade 5 level, and they're coming to grade 7. And there's 2 schools that you mentioned, one rural, one urban. Then clearly the problem is at the primary level. But when they say resource constraints are preventing them from sending students out of the primary level into secondary schools. Reverend Thwaites, tell Jamaicans, what do they mean specifically when they cite resource constraints as this massive inhibitor?
The financing of the education system, and I take responsibility for the period I had some influence there. The financial allocations for the education system are lopsided. They're upside down. Professor Patterson points out that in his study. We are, for example, spending money on a grade 12 and 13 and spending a lot of money at the Heart Trust NTA and at other tertiary institutions where while we have limited, inadequate money spent at the base. My experience was that some 40% of our children at the pre-primary and primary level were coming to school hungry. An experience I had also was that some 40% of them, certainly in the higher levels of the primary schools, were not doing homework. Many of them simply cannot. We're dealing with what? Attendance, an average of 80%. One of the schools that I mentioned earlier is averaging 65% attendance every day. We need to spend more money at that level and find other ways to finance at the higher level. They will almost take care of themselves if the children are properly ready for those studies. My own perception is that was when I served in the ministry that about 25 to 30% of the very large budget was not being spent efficiently. But there is a torpor, there is an ennui in the system, which makes it very difficult to change. I have no criticism of the present administration of the ministry. They are doing what I tried to do, which was to keep a system going. The energy for change needs to come out of the kind of insight and wisdom that the Patterson report offers, and it can only happen if you have a very high level of political and social consensus that radical reform is needed.
Hear you on that. Roddy Thwaites mentioning a sense of ennui in the education system, and I couldn't agree with him more. We're up on the break, our final break of the day. Let me take, just before we go to the break, in terms of schools that have been found to be ineffective, let's look at what the data says. 2015, which was the most recent nationwide evaluation from the National Education Inspectorate, 55% of schools ineffective and another 45% judged unsatisfactory. Only 55% of teachers assessed as satisfactory or above. And I can tell you, anytime you make any critique or criticism that puts teachers in the crosshairs, you get an immediate pushback. And suddenly, men and women who are reasonable, bright people, intelligent people, suddenly lose their rag and they don't listen after that. 30% of schools, secondary schools, 0 CSEC passes, 70% 0 CAPE passes. I'm saying to Jamaica that if we don't put our energies into correcting this, we're going to be paying a heavy price in 10 to 15 years' time when the cycle of youngsters matures into young adults and then are in charge of moving the levers of this country. And that's when we're going to look back in regret. We are in a position to be able to not do that. More on this discussion after this break.
You've weathered the storm, but rebuilding and preparing for back to school have taken a toll. It's time to get some money in your pocket. At Chris and Charles, we understand your financial needs. With just a quick call, you can access funds to catch up on bills and cover unexpected expenses. Our process is fast, simple, with funds deposited in your account in no time. Don't stress, get money in your pocket. Call 876-926-0609 or visit our website today. Conditions apply. When you think loans, think Chris and Charles.
Jamaica Plumbing Supply's 36th Anniversary Super Sale, September 20th to the 28th. Celebrate with us with up to 36% off at our Kingston and Portmore branches and online. Upgrade your bathroom with modern vanities, faucets, showers, and more. Plus, we now stock power tools to get the job done. Get up to 36% off during the Jamaica Plumbing 36th Anniversary Super Sale, September 20th to the 28th.
Rise and shine and start your day with the Wealthy Club's Power Hour. It's a transformative mind-body workout infused with strength training, yoga, meditation, and journaling. Every Wednesday from 5:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. Join us for free, live in person right here at the marketplace in front of Camila's Kitchen, or you can join in from anywhere in the world thanks to our friends over at Just Create. And afterwards, refuel with your post-workout breakfast from Camila's Kitchen to truly support your wellness and your fitness goals. Catch us for this special workout hour on CVM TV on Mondays from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. and a repeat at 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Well-Fit Wednesdays right here at the marketplace. See you there.
Get ready for a schoolboy football doubleheader. First up, 2023 Ben Francis Cup winners McGraw battle Charlie Mount at 1:30 p.m. Then, Dintil Technical and Uaten High square off at 3:30 p.m. The Costa Cup doubleheader, October 5. See it happen on CVM TV.
Schoolboy Football, brought to you by HChem, AIM Financial Services, Texaco, and Connix.
Protecting Jamaica's borders is a key priority for the Jamaica Customs Agency. The JCA will remain vigilant and resolute in effectively fulfilling this mandate. The time, brought to you by the Jamaica Customs Agency, is
8:45.
Welcome back to this special discussion we're having on CVM TV. We're doing a series of programs looking at education in the country as we try to see how we can coax better results out of the system. How can we build a better system so that students are able to learn in an improved environment, teachers are able to work in a better environment, and the huge sums that government allocates to education that the public can look on and see value for money. And Maureen Dwyer made a very good point at the top to say, look, it's not just in exam results that you're tracking value added or improvement or looking at student getting an advantage. It's in the whole student. So the whole student package you're looking at, not just exam results, even though that is an excellent vein of where a child is at a particular point in time. We're in the dying embers of the program, so we're going to look now at some solutions or the pathways to solutions. I know some ideas have been mentioned already in this conversation. If you look at what the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission report said, and this is Professor Patterson and his team, standardizing the use of the value-added ranking for secondary schools is one way that they've suggested. They're also recommending that in future years, all secondary schools be evaluated and ranked using this value-added procedure, complementing the traditional evaluation that is administered by the National Education Inspectorate. Then, the value-added ranking should be combined with the rankings on the regular CSEC and CAPE exams to produce a composite rank developed by the Education Transformation Commission. The Ministry of Education and Youth, MOEY, promptly addressing both sets of evaluations with special attention paid to schools that perform poorly on the value-added assessment, and then schools that perform well should be publicly acknowledged and rewarded. Encouragement sweetens labor, they say. Then both sets of evaluations should be made publicly available and widely disseminated and discussed to stakeholders. Every effort being made to ensure that all schools are able to provide the appropriate data needed to conduct the value-added procedure. These are some of the recommendations set down by the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission. And so I come to you, Professor Patterson. On top of that, given not much would have changed between 2022 and now, if anything at all, is there any way you would suggest then that we apply a variation to anything that was recommended, or do those recommendations stand supreme as the pathway to improved outcomes?
No, we have to begin by prioritizing the recommendations, and I think that's what the ministry and Dr. Stokes has tried to do. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of seriously thinking. If you want me to sort of emphasize one thing, how we allocate the limited resources we have, but quite substantial in relative terms, relative to the other needs of the country. The number one thing we can do is reallocate those resources to emphasize, I've said this before, I'm saying it again because it's important, the foundation, the bottom, the primary schools, that we do not promote kids from the primary school system into the secondary school system, that we're just making fools of them. We're sort of setting them up for failure. That we make sure that every kid who goes into the secondary school can, at the very least, have sort of elementary numeracy and literacy. So this is going to create quite a problem. There's going to be a strong pushback because of the iniquity in the system is that we are, in fact, subsidizing the middle classes when we sort of allocate most of our funds to the upper levels.
Yes.
We are, in fact, subsidizing people who will be entering the middle classes, while, in fact, denying the fundamental essential resources which the mass of kids, almost the great majority of whom come from the working and lower classes, need. That's going to be a tough decision, and that's going to require real political, sort of courage.
Yes.
And if I can leave you with one sort of emphasis, we must shift funds from the higher levels of the system to the primary system so that they can get the resources they need.
Hear you on that.
Not enough.
Hear you on that. Lady Maureen Dwyer, your perspective on the pathway to a fix, a solution, the prescription for the problem we have where value added is concerned. What are you suggesting?
Okay, so in 2015, from the NEI, we did make a recommendation for a differentiated funding model. Because when you talk about equity, you really have to make sure that those that are at the bottom, they have a strong enough or a tall enough platform to stand on so they can reach up to the others. And so we did make that recommendation. That is yet to be realized. Although I know there's been increased funding, it certainly is not enough. But as I said before, it's not simply a matter of the money.
Yes.
It's also allocating resources well, could also mean putting your best teachers in the areas where you need them most. Looking again at rationalizing curricular offerings and making sure that we're focusing on those things that we know will take our children to the forefront in the shortest possible time, because right now we really have no time. And so we have to sit and balance. We know we don't have unlimited amount of money and unlimited resources, but we really have to sit and balance and look at those that are most in need and target so that we can pull the system up in the shortest space of time. But in the meantime, I will tell you from the inspectorate's standpoint that we're continuing our work. We get into our schools. We've seen improvements, but we're not happy. Most of our schools are lodging at a place called Satisfactory, and that's not good enough. We are looking at leadership in our schools. We've seen some improvements since 2015, and by the way, a new report will come out soon that will show you some changes. But we're looking carefully at leadership in our schools. We're looking at the quality of the teaching in our schools. We're looking at the progress that the students are making, and also the kinds of ways in which the resources are being used to get us the best results. So we're still on that.
Yes.
We're giving our schools reports that they can follow with recommendations. And we're also making recommendations to the system for those improvements. So we're on it. We've trialed the value-added model at a deeper level.
Yes.
And so we're continuing the push.
Yes. May I ask you before I move on to Reverend Thwaites, Dr. Dwyer, the last ADI report was 2015. We've been waiting 9 years now. You say soon. How soon? Next year, early first quarter, next year, second quarter, when?
Well, okay. We did a report during COVID, and that one is out. It's up on the website. I'm sorry you didn't do that before we came to this. And we have one that is with our editors now for 2020, 21, 2022. And we have the results. That's what I'm speaking from now.
Yes.
And that will be out in no time. It's now September. By October, you'll see that one.
Excellent. We'll hold you to that. Reverend Thwaites, I mean, we're talking about real people, children. As I say, the fact that you are in a position to invest time into your child's education, invest resources into your child's education, and your child can go through primary and secondary school achieving good grades with a chance to be anything they want, it should not give you any comfort, because there are many children who can't do the same as your child can, and that is why it's a problem that we all need to solve. May I ask you, sir, from your experience in the time at the ministry and your experience with people and beyond, how do we affect the outcomes that we want to see where value added is concerned in our schools?
First of all, give medicine to those who need it. The across-the-board allocation from the ministry, as has been said, is unfair. It needs to be recalibrated. I know of persons, a considerable number, who are paying up to $150,000 a term to send their children to a preparatory school. And when they get to the high school, they're asked to pay $50,000 a year. And the Ministry of Education is telling them that that is optional. That is hopelessly confounded. It doesn't work. We have to revise the code, the 1980 code. It is unserviceable. During my time, where teachers were evaluated annually, at least 90% used to get an evaluation of excellent performance. That clearly did not indicate proper levels of accountability, with all respect to their efforts. And very importantly, we have to stop this business of automatic promotion. It is immoral, if I may use a religious term, it is a mortal sin to send a child to another level when they have not achieved the basic fundamentals of the previous grade that they have been in. These are things that are going to be difficult, as Professor Patterson says, but those are matters that we ought to be dealing with on a bipartisan national level if we hope to move our growth beyond the anemic 1% level, and if we ever hope to get to this bypass this terrible disappointment of the failure of 5 and 4 and the 2030 vision.
Hear you on that, sir. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you, Reverend Ronald Thwaites, the former Education Minister, Dr. Maureen Dwyer, Chief Inspector, National Schools Inspectorate, and Professor Orlando Patterson, the Chairman of the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission. Thank you very much for your contributions this evening. May I sign off by saying that, you know, we busy ourselves with so many things that are really, in context, not important. Education is the most important thing. And I'm saying to you tonight, if you're a parent, you need to invest time into your child's education. You don't have to be rich to give a child an opportunity to self-actualize. Our parents weren't rich and they didn't do a bad job with pointing us in the right direction. You can do it. you should demand higher levels of performance from the teachers who teach your students. You should demand higher levels of investment from your government and smarter investment. You should demand that school leaders hold those they employ to account. You should participate in parent-teacher association meetings, and you should, as a community, form a protective cocoon around the children from the environmental factors that knock them off their stride and compromise their ability to learn. Jamaica, you have been warned. The education situation demands all hands on deck. It demands more than a few good men and women. It demands all of us. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we close out this series, Education in Focus, on CVM TV.
September 7 to December 14 on CVM TV.
School